and lay down. So laying down, we can place our feet on the floor. We can just lift up the pelvis and lengthen the pelvis towards the feet. And we're just going to take our arms out wide to start with and have a little wiggle around, have a little squirm around on the floor so you can sort of snuggle your body into the floor a little. And with this action, there can be a little sort of shaking into it, and this is a really great way to loosen up the body. So when we're moving in that way that is more sort of random, that we get with a little sort of squirm and a little sort of shake, and then we get this loosening because the muscles can't grip into any single position. So it's a really nice way to loosen the body up and start to wake us up. And then we're going to extend both legs to the floor, and we'll bring the legs in towards each other. So let's just lift the legs up one by one, and there might be a little sort of lift up of the buttock and a reach down so we can lengthen out. So we can draw the legs in towards each other, and then we're going to take our arms above our head. Now if you haven't got enough space above your head, you can hold your elbows depending on where you're practicing, and then we'll reach into the feet and we'll reach into the fingers. So we're going to go for this full extension from the feet to the fingertips, breathing deeply and just feeling how that full extension, that commitment to bringing our whole body into this practice it's enlivening, it's vibrant, it wakes us up to our own experience of being here. Now there may be a little tone in the belly, and then that feeds a lengthening up through the front of the body. The breath is really steady and easeful. Okay, wonderful. Now let's just ease that off. So just feel that retreat of the limbs back as we just soften. And then tune into your breath here. So feel how the breath is a support of this. Feel the release that comes into the belly, the release that comes into the pelvic floor, the release that comes into the facial muscles. And this drawing towards a little sense of dissolving Laya Yoga, this classical form of yoga which is to dissolve or to merge. And what we feel here in these little moments of release is that what we release into is the whole. And when I say the whole, I mean the whole, everything, not the contraction just into our own physical form. So there's an expansion out into everything. Okay, well let's bend our knees and place our feet to the floor now. Let's lift and lengthen the pelvis again, and we're going to raise both legs up towards the ceiling, and we can play with a little bit of movement here, maybe moving the legs alternately. So moving the legs between extension at the knee and flexion at the knee. So we can start to feel into that movement, and there's a little movement that's coming into the hip and groin area as well as the knees, and we can feel into this gradual extension that we get through the back of the thigh, through the hamstrings, maybe into the calves. So if we bring a little dorsiflexion to the feet as we reach up, that is to bring the toes back towards the shins, we can reach that extension into the calves as well. So we'll just breathe into that as we move. Wonderful. And then we're going to raise both legs up towards the ceiling. Let's just take a few circles of the ankles, loosening up the joints. And you can wiggle your toes as you do this, so you can loosen up the joints of the toes as well take the circles in both directions and feel your breath at the center of this. So if we're suddenly moving the body fairly swiftly, even just a small part of the body like the ankles, we can kind of lose our center sometimes. So we want to keep drawing back to the breath. So it is possible to move through a relatively swift practice whilst maintaining awareness. But, we have to work at that sometimes. So let's keep drawing our attention back to our breath. Let's keep drawing our attention back into our center. Okay, now let's bring the legs to a relatively still position. Some of you might have your knees bent. Some of you will have your legs in extension, just depending on how easeful that feels. We're not forcing, but we're going to lower one leg down slowly now as we keep one leg raised. So let's move through that action, the slow lowering down as we breathe. Wonderful. Now there's a point at which you'll feel the abdominal muscles really kick in. If we're doing this slowly, it makes us work a little bit harder. So let's breathe through that. And of course, if you need to move a little quicker, if it's too strong, that's fine. But once we've brought the leg down, we'll take a full breath here. Or at least a full breath. Maybe you'll take a few breaths here. And we'll find a little bit of release in the belly. And then we're going to watch as the belly comes back into engagement, comes back into support for this raising leg, because we're going to pick that leg back up, and this is the moment, just the first pick up of the leg that requires most energy, and we can feel that. And there's a point at which it gets a little bit easier once we get past that 45-degree angle. And we keep the breath flowing. Fantastic. And then when both legs are raised again, we find the breath here, we give to it. And then in your own time, we're going to lower the other leg down. Okay, so again, it's a slow action, lowering that leg down. We're breathing through it, so keep the breath steady, fluid. And then again, just notice how your body has intelligence. All you're particularly focusing on, or the action that you're creating, is to lower your leg to the floor, but you'll notice how your belly comes in to support it. Okay, and how we create this through the hip flexors, this eccentric extension that happens as we lower the leg. So in other words, they keep a little grip to lower the leg slowly. Again, once the leg is down, we find the breath. And just in that moment of finding the breath here, releasing the belly, again, we can just touch into that experience of dissolving. Okay, let's raise that leg back up, and again, we'll take it slowly if we can. So there's tone in the belly. The breath is flowing, so holding your breath won't help you with the action, just makes it more difficult, in fact. And then again, once the leg's up, we can just pause there for a moment. And then again, we're going to feel into a little bit of movement of both of the legs, and we might move them alternately, so we can just broaden across the front of the hips as we bend the knees. We can loosen up into the groin area, so again, we can just give a little bit of movement there in the hip flexor muscles. And we can feel a little roll across the back, so there's a little loosening through the lower back. The breath is flowing. Marvellous. Let's bend the knees and just let the heels drop towards the buttocks, but we're going to keep the feet up off the floor for a moment and have, again, another little movement across the back of the pelvis so the knees can move from side to side as we breathe. Okay, and then we come back to the center and we're just going to very slowly bring the feet down to the floor. So I want you to really slow down this action. So let it be a meditation. Let the simple act of rolling down the back of the pelvis towards the tailbone to bring the feet towards the floor be a meditation. And then as we come down in this way and the toes will eventually just lightly touch the floor, we'll just feel the sensitivity of that light contact with the toes and the floor, and then the light contact of the balls of the feet as we lower the feet down, and the light contact of the heels. And then we'll drop our weight into our feet and we'll feel that little roll back of the pelvis, and we'll feel the breath. Just feel how that gathers your breath, how it gathers your attention, how it's an invitation back into our own center. Just these really simple actions. It's not what we do, it's how we do it. It's the commitment to dharana, dhyana, samadhi, what are collectively called samyama yoga, and they are focus, meditation and absorption. Okay, let's now take ourselves over onto our side. So roll onto your side so you're facing towards the screen, and we are going to support our head with this lower arm. So where you have your hand positioned is up to you. What you want is to feel comfortable in the neck and comfortable in the wrist. So for me, having the heel of the hand just behind the ear and the fingers pointing down towards the neck is comfortable. Okay. Press one hand into the floor in front of you. Let's lift up the rib cage. Let's lengthen it away from the pelvis. Let's lift up the elbow and lengthen it away from the armpit. And then let's feel into a little bit of movement here. So we can have a little rocking back and forth. Leaning into the front hand as we breathe. Rolling back. So there's a few things that are going on here. Of course, we're massaging into the outer thigh and towards the front of the thigh, so into the iliotibial band and the quadriceps. But there's also this little gradual loosening up around the circumference of the waist. So see if you can tune into that. So you can feel into that lovely loosening. Feel into the breath. And again, allow it to be rich. So it's rich by giving our awareness to it. We could lay here and sort of think about our day, think about yesterday or whatever we want to think about, and we could still be doing exactly the same action. But our experience would be totally different. Or we could be here just in this simple action of moving forwards and back and allowing our awareness to be fully immersed within the experience. And this is what becomes transformative in a yoga practice. This is what's really rich. And this is what integrates us. Okay, we're going to pause here. We're going to bend that top knee up and draw it up towards the body, and then we're going to take some rotation so we can feel into the work around the hip, into the hip extender muscles. We can feel that little stretch out through the inner thigh. And as we move in this way, we're creating this movement in external rotation there. Then there's a little internal rotation, so we get this full sort of work into the gluteal muscles. And again, this repetitive movement, it can be done in a way that we can either check out of it, of course you're welcome to, or we can check into it. And when we check into it, this is when we get that little magic that we often experience in yoga, when we feel fully immersed in it, fully absorbed. And this is what probably makes us return to yoga again and again, because that experience, it's transformative. Okay, now let's take that knee up towards the ceiling now. We've got probably that little grippy sensation in the buttock now. So this is supporting the knee joint as we bring the knee into extension. So we're not going to take hold of the toe as we often do in this position, but we're going to play with lengthening that leg up. We'll lengthen it up and bend the knee again, and we're just going to move between that action of extension and flexion at the knee. And again, depending on how we position the foot, that stretch is either going to be focused on the back of the thigh, or we can draw it into the calf. So to draw it into the full length of the leg, we need to pull the toes back towards the shin. So we need to move into that dorsiflexion of the foot. But it might feel, if that feels too much, then, play with your foot. You can point the toes up. It can be nice to feel that little stretch out through the shin as well. Okay, now let's bring that leg into extension. Breathe. I know that it may be feeling quite strong in the buttock now, but we're going to move the leg, and we're going to lower the leg slowly down like we did when we were on our back. So we're going to see if we can bring the leg down with focus and control, but also at the same time with a sort of release, a surrender into the experience. So lower it down, keep breathing. And then when the leg comes down, we can just pause there, feel that extension through this upper side of the body, breathe. Adjust your hand if you need to, move the head if you need to, if it's tight in the neck, because we're going to raise that leg back up again slowly. So what you'll notice as we start to raise the leg, there's a point at which it has to externally rotate, so the toes have to rotate towards the ceiling to bring that leg up. So we lift the leg up and extend it wherever it wants to extend to. And then again, we're going to just slowly lower the leg down once more. And again, if we allow this to be meditative, so in other words, we bring everything to it. We let this action captivate us rather than the internal dialogue of the mind. Then we start to get into this state that we call yoga. The state of yoga is the state of integration or union. So we pause there, we breathe, we just watch and see what we feel here. Releasing sensations through the shin perhaps, through the calf, through the thigh, into the buttock, into the breath. Okay, let's bend up our knees. Let's take a little lean forwards. Let's push into our hands, and then let's come to the other side so we can just switch our legs around, and we'll come down. And again, we're going to come down and give ourselves a little bit of support here. So placing the hand in that same position, or changing the position if you need to. It might be different on each side, but it feels comfortable for the neck, feels comfortable for the wrist. We can lengthen out the body, pressing the hand into the floor, lifting up the rib cage, lengthening it away, lengthening out the armpits. So I'll just give you a better view by taking off a layer there. Okay. And then once again, we're going to play with that little rocking forward. So it's not a big movement. It's not a particularly exciting movement, but it is, or it can be, a completely absorbing movement. So notice this, or commit to it. Breathe into it. And we know when we're really entering what we call the state of yoga, because everything else falls away. There is only this. And, we feel like we are where we're supposed to be. This is exactly where we should be, right here, right now. And that can be a joyful experience, to find yourself where you should be. So we can feel that there's this massage of the thigh. We can feel maybe the loosening around the band of the waist. And then again, we're going to take that top knee and we're going to circle that knee. So we're going to get into that movement, into the hip, into the buttock, into the inner thigh. We're going to breathe through it, so as we move, we can feel that that movement is supported by the breath. Not just supported, but the movement and the breath are one. They're a single experience. Okay, let's rotate the knee up again. So we've probably got that little grippy sensation in the buttock now. Now this is good, because when we bring the leg into extension, it's supported. Okay, so let's again play with that extension and flexion at the knee, and we can feel that movement all the way through the leg. It's not just the movement of the knee, but we'll feel sensations that maybe into the hip again might be a primary area. We can feel the stretch through the hamstrings. We can feel the engagement of the quadriceps. If we bring that little dorsiflexion into the foot, we can reach the extension into the lower leg as well. Breath flows. Now, I didn't say on the first side, if you find balance tricky at all in this posture, you can bend the bottom leg if you need to. Okay, now we've reached through that a few times. Again, we're going to reach that leg up to extension, and then we're going to slowly lower the leg down with some control. So you can keep a little tone in your belly. That will help with the control. And as you lower the leg, feel that you're reaching into the foot. Let the breath flow. You can watch your leg moving from external rotation to internal rotation as it lowers down. So you might feel that at the hip joint. And again, it's a moving meditation. Breath flows. Okay, we're going to raise the leg up again, slowly. So when we have this focus, meditation, absorption, this samyama yoga, Patanjali tells us that it is through the mastery of these three elements that the inner light of wisdom shines forth. Tajjayat prajna lokaha. So maybe we can feel that. Okay, let's lower the leg down slowly again. And as we do this inner light of wisdom, prajna, comes forth. It shines. Okay, let's just take a little roll onto our belly now. So come up onto your forearms, extend the legs back, lift them up one by one. Reach the body forward so we can kind of dig in our elbows and forearms and extend the chest forwards. And then we're going to roll ourselves down to the floor, one hand on top of the other. We'll just rest our head on our hands, either forehead down or turn your head to the side, whatever's comfortable. And we'll play with a little rocking across the pelvis. So a little, again, it's like a little shake out that ripples up through the body, that ripples down through the legs. And then we just come to pause. And just feel as the body settles itself, as those ripples subside. And even though, as soon as we stop the movement, the body, on one level we can see that there is a stopping. On another level we can feel that there's still an energetic settling of those ripples going on. Okay, let's bring our hands underneath the shoulders. We're going to tuck the toes. We're going to push into our hands. We're going to tone the belly and we're going to pull the hips back and lift ourselves straight up into a downward facing dog. And as we lift into our downward facing dog, we're going to press our hands into the floor so we can get this real extension up through the body. If we bend our knees and re-extend like we've been playing with a little bit this morning, we can feel into this tipping of the pelvis. It really helps us to establish that nice, clean, sharp tilt of the pelvis so we're not rounding in the lower back. And then we'll just come to bring our arms and legs to extension, the whole body to extension. And then we're going to play, as we often do in downward facing dog, with bending one knee as one leg straightens, but we're going to really focus on that turn of the torso that happens. So you can let the knee cross in front of the other leg as it bends, and then feel a little twisting through the torso. So keep that strong support through the arms. That's it, a little movement from side to side. That's it, turning into it, rotating into it, breathing into it. Okay, well done. And then coming back to the center, pausing here, breathing here. And then we'll come down to our hands and knees. We'll take a breath here. Just feel into any movement. Have a little wiggle across the hips, a little roll through the spine, whatever you need. We will release the hands in a moment, so I know that some people, the wrists can find this quite strong, but we're going to release them in a moment. So just bear with it. Breathe. Okay, let's take the knees apart. We'll have our feet a little distance apart. We're going to come into a sort of tucked in version of a child pose. Okay, so we're going to thread our arms through the legs so we can sort of sit back towards our heels. We're going to take the arms through and we're going to thread them all the way through so we bring the hands down towards the feet. Now for some people it can feel, if it feels a bit too compressive across the chest, you can be a little further out like this so we can have the hips lifted, the head to the floor. But if you're able to thread through and you're not uncomfortable with that, you can thread through so your hands can come to make contact with the feet and your forehead is either resting to the floor or you can turn your head to the side if that's more comfortable. And then we just breathe into it. So when we sort of tuck ourselves in the posture like this, there is this gathering inwards that we can feel. We're just drawing into our own center, just enjoying that little pulling back in, returning to the center, returning to our own source, our own essence. Feel the breath at the heart of the experience. So let's take 2 or 3 slower, deeper breaths that we really give to. We can call these mindful breaths, in that we're going to hold our awareness within the breath, not in a way that feels uptight. It's a spacious awareness. A loving awareness even. Wonderful. Now let's bring ourselves up so you can raise your head a little. You might need to slide one arm out first and then the other, because we can feel like we get a little bit stuck in that posture. And then we're going to come forwards. We're just going to extend our legs out one by one, give the feet a little bit of movement. Have, again, a little tone in the belly as you do this. That's it, breathe. Okay, we're going to come back up into a downward facing dog. So let's just check that alignment. Hands shoulder width apart, fingers spread, middle fingers in line with each other, feet towards hip width apart. Lift up, extend. Let's really get that lift into the torso. Let's focus on the energy that we place into the hands to rise up through the body. Let's focus on the breath. And then let's take a little lean forwards to bring the shoulders above the wrists. So we come into a plank position. We're in this straight line position with the body, or straightish. There's some tone in the belly for support. The breath is flowing. Remember, holding your breath doesn't help. And then we're going to pull this through into a head up dog pose. So to do this, we just simply pull the chest through the arms. We let the pelvis dip down towards the floor without dropping the knees to the floor, but of course you can if you need to. You may flip the feet over if that's more comfortable, but you can keep the toes tucked. We broaden across the collarbones. We lift in the chest. We keep this tone in the belly. We breathe. Okay, now let's see if we can take it back to a downward facing dog. So again, we can roll over the feet or just lift the feet and tuck the toes under. Extend back, enjoy that openness, that length through the lower back, following that back arch. We breathe, we give, we surrender. Okay, let's come down. Sit back on your heels for a moment, so there's just a little rest here. Hands can rest in the lap. Take support if you need to between buttocks and heels, beneath the ankles. Breathe. Okay, and then let's extend our legs out in front of us. Okay, so we've got our knees towards this right angle position. So that means our feet aren't too close in towards us, they're not too far away. So it's a position that feels quite stable. We're going to bring our hands to the floor behind us. So there's a little lean back. Our fingertips are about sort of, I guess, 5 inches, or what is that, 5 inches? I don't know, I'm not very good at measurements, but a sort of span of your thumb and finger away, thereabouts. And then we can feel into this movement, leaning into one hand, leaning into the other hand. So there's a little side to side sway. We can move across the sitting bones, and we're broadening across the chest. We're deepening the shoulder blades in towards the back ribs. So there's a little, again, loosening that's happening here. This stretch across the pectoralis, this little movement across the back of the body. And then we'll come into the center, we'll tone the belly as we lift into the chest, and we'll breathe. The forehead softens and the jaw releases. Okay, let's take a little movement of our legs from side to side now. So let's dip the knees to one side, and as we do that, I want you to lift up into your chest. I want you to press into your hands so there's a rising up. So we get into this twist of the torso, and then we move the knees to the other side. So there's some work through the arms, there's extension into the knees so you can reach into them. So we can feel that there's this sort of two-way extension, lifting up through the body, extending down through the knees. We're getting this delightful, well, I think it's delightful, massage of the buttocks. And the breath is at the heart of it. Okay, now we're going to come back to the center when you're ready. We're going to take a little lean forwards and just drape our forearms over the shins, so that will keep a little bit of space for the wrists, so the hands just hang. We can then lift up through the chest, so we're not collapsing down into the lower back like this. We're creating this extension, so there's a little slight traction here of the forearms on the shins. And the breath flows, and we can have a little shimmy, a little shake out, some deep breaths. We can watch as the wrists become a little more spacious, the joints of the fingers become a little more spacious. The breath becomes a little more spacious. Okay, marvellous. We're going to bring our hands back to the floor as we did. Similar action, but this time we're going to actually lift our pelvis up to take ourselves into the twist. So there's going to be a little lift and then a dip down. Okay, so hands are in the same position, a little distance behind us, so the fingertips are a little further back than the buttocks. Okay, fingers are spread. We're going to press into the floor. We're going to lift the pelvis up off the floor, lift the buttocks from the floor, and then we're going to take the knees over and we press into the hands and we lift. We can come back into the center, and if you need to lower down at the center point you can, and then re-extend up and then dip the knees so you roll over the feet. Okay, and then again we'll move through that one more time to each side. Breathing into it. So there's a little more work here, up through the upper body. Okay, let's bring the buttocks back down to the floor. Walk the feet forward so it tips us forwards of the sitting bones. Rest your forearms on your shins. Have a little side to side wiggle, shake, shimmy. Deeper breaths. That's it, just give to it. Let the forehead soften, let the jaw release. Let the breath flow. And again, tune into that wonderful releasing sensation through the wrists, through the joints of the fingers. You know, when I feel really absorbed in my practice, I can feel that something like watching the space re-enter into the joints of my fingers can completely absorb my whole being. It's a small thing, but you know, we sometimes mistake yoga for doing more, getting further. And actually, you know, the more absorbed we get in the practice, the less we actually need in terms of doing. Okay, it's already time for Shavasana, I'm afraid. So we're going to come down. So you can have, if you want support underneath your knees, you can take support. You might want support underneath your head. You're going to come down either with the arms out wide, or you're welcome to rest your hands on your torso. The only thing we don't want to do in Shavasana is pin our arms against the side of the body like this. So we want to feel spacious across the chest, released in the shoulders. Okay, feet can be a little distance apart, so up to hip width apart. Don't go too, if you go too wide with your feet, it closes the lower back. If there is tightness in the lower back, then I recommend that you have a little bit of support underneath the knees. If you've got a bolster or a pillow, that's great. And then we lay ourselves down. So we can take, once we've laid ourselves down, we can take some slow, deep breaths. And in those slow, deep breaths, what we have here is that invitation which we get through our inhalation. The beginning of the inhalation, through the inhalation, we get this invitation into dharana, focus. And then as that draws in and we've gathered that breath, we can feel this invitation into dhyana, meditation. And then as it releases, there's the invitation into samadhi, absorption. So even through the course of one single breath, we can feel this relationship of the samyama yoga, this union of these three elements of yoga that lead us into absorption. And these three elements that when we master them, as Patanjali states in the Yoga Sutra, the inner light of wisdom shines forth. So see if you can feel it through the breath. Focus, meditation, absorption. Focus, meditation, absorption with each breath. And then what we realize here is actually all we need to enter into the state of yoga is our breath. But we are fortunate enough to have many tools of yoga, the body being one of them, the breath being one of them. And the unifying tool is awareness itself. So let's take 2 or 3 slower, deeper breaths here. Really giving to those breaths, enjoying those breaths. And when you've taken those breaths, whatever you need, you may bend your knees and place your feet to the floor. Of course, you're welcome to stay on in your shavasana as you wish. But if you're coming out with me now, you may then, if you're happy to roll to both sides, you may roll over onto your right side and pause there. Having at least a breath there and then rolling over onto your left side and pausing there. And then we can just begin with a little bit of movement, a little stretch out, whatever we need, a little wiggle of the toes and fingers. whatever movement you need, deeper breaths, and bring yourselves up from your side, and we'll just close our practice here with a single Om together. So come to any comfortable seated posture. We'll bring our hands up into Anjali Mudra to the heart center. Okay, and then we're going to take a deep breath in to prepare. Thank you all very much. Namaste, Namovaha. Reference to you all. Thank you. I hope you all have a wonderful day.